Hello.
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 So yeah, this will be an interesting conversation. I think over the weekend, was chatting with both of you separately, and about there's a topic of burnout that I think is I don't know what is in the air right now, but it seems to be very pervasive, and so figured we'd all get each other on a podcast as usual because that's I guess podcasts replace group calls. Just to, riff on this topic. But I guess for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro? Maybe Gallup, starting with you.
Sure. I'm Ghalib. I'm co-founder CEO of Polytomic. We're a data ETL tool. I've been in data for over a decade now, so have seen all sorts of messes, burnouts, what have yous, and continue to do so.
Carly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carly. I'm a director of engineering at Microsoft. I'm also a content creator on LinkedIn, and I most recently was writing about burnout because I feel burned out.
Why do you feel burned out, Carly?
I think the why is probably a very long discussion. Maybe we go into what I feel first because I think
Sure.
that's really
Yeah.
easier for me to articulate. To me, the feeling of burnout is really feeling like you're on a treadmill. You're running really fast, but you're not getting anywhere. And in a society where we, and especially I, measure myself in like productivity and what I'm able to output, I feel like I start every day with a long list of how to be productive. And on the best days, I can get through the whole list and go back to zero. But are you ever perfectly productive? No. So I start each day with this sort of feeling of debt. And it's just been growing and growing and growing. And I thought that the new year would bring some relief. Taking a vacation would fix things. But I also feel that same sense of prioritizing against this never ending list in my personal life. And so it's like, when do we get any relief?
Is there a sense of maybe the work list just isn't worth it in some sense? Do you think that's a trigger for burnout as well? Where yes, the list is never ending, but the essence of the list is even meaningless, which may be a salient fact. What do you think? Does that resonate?
It does. And I think that finding meaning in work and in being productive is probably some sort of zero sum game where maybe you'll be able to find perfect meaning in your work, but then there will always be more to do. You can't save everyone, you can't help everyone. Like if you're working in some sort of charitable organization, right? Like the mere existence of charities means that there's people to help. And so I wonder, regardless of how much meaning you have, if it's more a sense of when do we allow ourselves to reflect and say that we've accomplished something, right? And I'm not good at that. I guess I just,
Mm.
do we measure it in quarters? Do we measure it in fiscal end year progress? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I feel like just thinking about when I felt this in past lives, something that or past lives, I suppose, or past periods of this life. Something that's rescued me has been when someone has said, "Hey, your work has mattered to me because of X or Y." I feel like it does tend to give people a bit of a shot in the arm, a bit of an energy boost.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think sometimes, at least friends in big companies, oh goodness, sometimes small companies too, honestly, it's just work after work after work. And at some point they wake up and go, who's this even for? Does this even matter? Right? The world hasn't given them a single signal as to why they even exist on the job and why they're taking a salary.
Yeah, that's pretty
Does
poignant.
that make sense? Joe, your blog post is one I read as well, actually, this weekend.
Oh,
I read both your blog posts. So I'm curious, obviously without, specific examples, but your blog post does mention you talk to people who suffer burnout. Any sense of themes or even archetypes actually, sort of, are these big company people, small company people across the board? Are they managers? Are they employees at the more individual level or what?
I mean, I would say what I was alluding to in my blog post was at least in the last week, mostly people at big tech companies
Mm,
feeling just I think there's a few things, right? It's I think there's been a lot of I think uncertainty, with the reliability of one's position, especially at a big company where they are already indicating they're going to do lots of layoffs. They've probably already done a lot of layoffs last year, and now it continues. I think that's definitely part of it. And then so you're doing a lot more with a lot less. And I get the sense that no matter if you're a leader or if you're an individual contributor, everyone's kind of looking out for themselves right now. I know leaders at
mm,
big tech companies, and it just seems like Game of Thrones right now. Everyone's conniving and backstabbing to sort of get ahead to where they want, or, and some people I know are just like, screw it. Like, I don't feel like, at a bare minimum, if I'm a leader, I'm basically going to be, a shoulder to cry on for whoever's left after layoffs happen.
Mm.
I may get laid off too, right? Because you don't know. I mean, this is sort of the Game of Thrones. You don't know if you're going to be around in the next episode or not, or Squid Game, or however you want to call it. But that, I mean, these are some of the things I think people are noticing, is that I think that there's sort of an implicit contract with companies, big or small, where it's been going away for a bit, but it was basically, if you work here, we'll take care of you. We're not guaranteeing you lifelong employment, but at least make your job worthwhile, right? This is sort of especially the theme of the 2010s, where, especially in tech, it was like, you know, great snacks, great,
The sort of
everything.
eternal family and
Yeah.
safety
And every
At least
reason to keep
they're
you in the
atmosphere.
office,
worthwhile.
right? And work. And now it's like, especially with the return to office mandates, it's more just, I think, any pretension of companies caring about their employees, or, flip it around, employees caring about their employers, is, I think it's almost this open disdain in a way that I've noticed. If you look at even the stuff that Meta just announced the other day, they announced a few things that are a bit controversial. And Amazon sort of following suit with getting rid of DEI, which, was a big mandate, but now it's not. I mean, read into that what you will, but what I read into it is, this in this new era, it's basically all about the bottom line. It always has been, but we kind of disguised it. But I think it's going to be a bit more, or a bit less compassionate, to put it lightly,
Mm.
than it used to be. That's just the vibe that I'm getting from people, is, and people sort of spent the New Year's sort of blocking it out, but New Year started, and people were just like, shit, not to go back to this hellhole. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's the uncertainty, right? There's all this stuff is just subject to change. At the beginning of the year, we're not even a quarter of the way into the year, right? And all this uncertainty is
We weren't
introduced.
even like a week and a half when I posted my article, and when Carly did. We're already into it, right? Not even a quarter.
There's a school of thought that says, well, perhaps leadership in these places is somewhat to blame for creating this false sense of security, maybe, where it's just so jarring, where these guys suddenly wake up and go, you know what, it's all different now. When really, maybe the current reality is, well, indeed reality, and we've been living in years of fantasy. Really not quite sure what to make of it. It's so early with so much flotsam and jetsam of turbulence. I don't know, Carly, any opinions?
I feel like it's, maybe we all use this term a lot, right? Like overcorrection. I think it's
Mm,
continue to see this overcorrection from a time where employees had more power. And it seems like almost every decision is made to remind us that we are powerless. And I don't know how many people find motivation in situations in which they feel powerless, right? It's very hard
mm.
to align those two things. So,
Like there's no agency. You're just subject to the
exactly.
winds and the waves.
Better be quiet and just keep your head down, or you'll be the next laid off. Like, we're making it clear that we don't need you, that we don't need you comfortable, that we don't care about the things we pretended to care about before, and do with that what you will. If you want to quit, good. That's one less severance package we have to write up.
Yeah, and there's a true sense of helplessness, right, that can come out of that, where you go, well, yeah, fine, I'll quit. But then you think, well, will the next place be the same?
Mm-hmm.
And now
Nobody
you're really
wants to
faced
be
with,
the new guy right now anywhere, right? First in, first out. That's
mm,
scary.
Mm-hmm. But yeah,
can you
then
say,
what were you saying, Caleb?
go ahead, Joe. I'm actually going to dig into Carly's comment, but go
Oh no,
ahead.
I'm gonna dig into some other tangents. So let's dig into Carly's comment first.
Yeah, so on the new, yeah, Carly, I come from the world of startups, right, which is very different from the world of big companies, although certainly I've got friends spanning both. Can you talk more about the new guy fear? And why is there a fear, for example? What can manifest if you're the new guy and so on?
I feel like back when employees kind of still had some power, right? There was this implicit understanding that a new employee wouldn't begin driving value for maybe 3 to 6 months. There'd be like
For
a
sure.
given training and education period. You'd have time to get settled. Now, since like Joe said, everything is coming down very clearly, more so taking off the rose colored goggles of shareholder value. If you're a new employee and you don't hit the ground running and amaze people in the first month, it feels like you're at risk because who has time for that, right?
Mm,
Like it's why I think junior developers are struggling so hard right now. No one wants to hire a junior dev and train them because they're not going to be valuable for at least a little while. And if you can't immediately come in and provide value, like what good are you? And that's
mm,
not me saying that. That's just like the feeling that I would get thinking about this problem is like, what is my value as a new employee? Okay, maybe if something's on fire and I'm the only person who can solve it and I'm saying it's going to take 6 months, they have to just suck it up and deal. But very few people come in, I think, with those niche skill sets that they're just so needed and they're going to fit in like a puzzle piece and they're going to fix things that it's just a scary position to be in. And companies have proven that they don't really know how to hire for the future. Like they said
mm,
that they overhired during COVID, right? But they've never said why and what they're doing to
Mm.
not do that again. And so you get
mm.
this feeling, even through the interview process, that nobody knows what the hell they're doing. So then what's to say that they even realize after 3 months that they need you anyway? They might not.
Well, so what do you do?
Which
Imagine sort of a potential employee in this position. At some point, I'm assuming people have to work to put
You
food
have
on the
to
table
risk
and
it,
so on.
but you're not going to
Just
quit.
acknowledge the
Yeah,
reality
you're
is what
not
you're
going to
saying.
quit your cushy job and go get another one.
Yep, 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 yep. Because
You're
you're
going to
risking all
probably
this.
stay put because it's risky to be the new person. But if you have to be the new person, you're going to, it's
Mm,
better than being unemployed, right? But I think what we're talking about probably from Joe's friends are people who are like currently employed, burned out, thinking what's next. And it's like, well, what is next? Do you just go work at like big tech company B from A
I
for
mean, that's kind of the
7 people?
option, isn't it? But then you only
Yeah,
have a few options, and it's
yeah.
like
it's risks all around, sort of
yeah. I
thing.
mean, it reminds me of an old saying in Wyoming. There aren't a lot of women there when I was growing up. It was like you don't lose your girlfriend, you just lose your turn.
That's true. Wyoming has more cows than people, so
Yeah, a lot of sheep too. But that reminds me of just the selection of companies out there too. If your life is in tech, like you ain't got a lot of options. What do you got the Magnificent Seven you can go work out, and after those seven, I don't know, you can go join a startup if you want. That's fun in its own ways and challenging in others. But yeah, it is fascinating. I got this book here, The Man Who Broke Capitalism. You should read it. It's about Jack Welch and
Mm,
how GE basically spearheaded the whole movement towards shareholder value. This wasn't a topic until Jack Welch started talking about it, and more importantly, doing it at GE back, I think, as soon as the 70s. He was notorious for just laying people off. They called it
mm,
Neutron Jack, where he would just go in and just lay off like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people at GE. And it was all about just, how can we hit this quarter's number? So this is where it all came from, is
mm,
Jack Welch. And it's fascinating because it worked at GE, and GE somehow magically would hit its quarterly number every quarter. But then you start realizing that it's actually there was a lot of shenanigans going on behind the scenes at GE Capital,
yep.
you know,
Or financial engineering.
financial engineering, yeah, supply chain stuff like will just the way they would ship orders and count those as sales, like moving inventory between warehouses was considered a sale, like that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Just whatever it took to hit the number. And then because you're incentivized to hit your number, now it's pretty much you take a very mercenary feeling towards your employees. So I mean, GE was the first to really break that social contract of employer and employee relationship, where back in the day it was lifelong employment. Now that is not a thing that happens anywhere these
Mm,
days. And but it's interesting because the people who they talk about in this book who left GE, the disciples and the sort of the acolytes of Jack Welch, went on to put companies like Boeing and many other companies, which ended up becoming just utter failures because it was just this relentless focus on shareholder value. And in the case of Boeing, that became basically a financial company, or
mm,
run by spreadsheets. And you saw it happen. I mean, they may not be an ongoing concern. Who knows what happens to them? But it's just they had an engineering culture, and they gutted it. It's all like, well, that's not going to return shareholder value. So I think we've just been blinded by this notion of, and getting brainwashed by this notion of shareholder value for
mm,
so long that it doesn't matter. Like, anyone that's at these companies is basically collateral damage. Even at the top too. I mean, I think it almost seems like it's almost worse when you're at the very, very top of these companies. And I
hmm.
talk to people at these positions, and it's like it doesn't get any better. It's not like they're all out at the country club, hanging out. everyone's jockeying for positions, and it's, it's almost worse in some ways because, you don't have anyone. It's lonelier up there. You don't have anyone to talk to. You don't have any peers, right?
You're the figurehead too, right? Representing both success and failure, of course.
Course. So yeah, it's interesting, but as yeah, I definitely urge the audience, and maybe you guys, if you can get a chance, I mean, this is a fantastic read. I came away, because I grew up thinking Jack Welch, as far as business leaders went, he was, definitely the icon, and he certainly was,
Mm,
in the 90s and 2000s, especially when
yeah,
GE was like the biggest company around. But you learned what it took to get there, and it was basically a house of cards the whole entire time, right? And
yeah. His star has somewhat faded with time, it's true. Now, I suppose one question that comes to mind is, well, what's the alternative, right? If one could manufacture a world that's different, is there one that's possible to manufacture?
I think an interesting point to me here as we start talking about what this looks like across groups, maybe not the alternative, but I see people who are unemployed who are burned out. I see Gen
Mm.
Z
mm,
in college, they're burned out,
What
yeah,
are they burned out for? College is great.
right? And it's an interesting phenomenon that I think, we talk a lot about Gen Z and how they just want to, doom scroll and brain rot and all the things that come along with, being unproductive.
Mm,
But I wonder if we take a step back and we realize, okay, if they were born into a world where burnout was normalized, careers, your prospects are looking pretty bleak right now. The job market's terrible. They know people who are gainfully employed who hate their lives.
mm.
Why would you willfully get onto the treadmill?
Yeah, well, I don't mean to sound glib, but there's the aspect of people need to make money, right?
That's the
To
only reason,
survive. Yeah.
right? And I think that money doesn't bring meaning and it
Mm,
ultimately doesn't fix burnout. It just ends up being a handcuff. And of course, you have to earn money to survive. And so
mm,
there's really no choice there. But I mean, it literally is no wonder why they're the brain rot generation. They want to scroll TikTok and not think, because why would they want to do anything else?
mm,
What's the point? I'm supposed to go to work and be chasing some sort of like dopamine, meaning, searching for meaning in my life and finding it.
mm,
If I'm not finding it there, but I find it on TikTok and I can live with my parents, even though I don't want to,
mm.
what's the impetus to get into the rat race?
I remember they used to say the same thing about, well, I'm from the millennial generation. Goodness, sounds rather old. But post 2001 dot-com crash, very similar sentiments were being made. Well, not to sound, if one maybe can avoid sounding nihilistic, is there any job then that's, is it possible that there are indeed jobs that can be fulfilling?
I mean, it
Generally,
is.
the answer is yes.
I mean, I'm happy with what I do. I think you are, Gallup, and
Hmm.
Carly someday.
10% of the
I
time.
certainly historically there have been situations when I've been very unhappy with
Hmm.
again, you live long enough, you end up seeing all sorts across the spectrum.
Yeah, this is a spectrum too, right? I think burnout it's probably hitting a point in a wide spectrum of
Mm,
some sort of unhappiness, forced productivity continuum. And like
mm,
at any moment in time, someone could probably feel burned out at home but fulfilled in their work, or vice versa. I wonder if like the feeling of burnout though that we describe when you rage quit your job or something else happens is when any one of those factors becomes too all consuming.
I think so. Like I've rage quit jobs before, a few times
Tell us
actually.
about it.
It's fun. The last place I was at, I think the last job I had was 2017, maybe 2016, something like that. And I just felt like I wasn't doing the type of work that I knew I could be doing. And I felt like the group of people I was with at this particular startup weren't the types of people that I wanted to do my best work with.
mm,
You know what I mean? I didn't have the level of respect for them or for what they were doing. And so I told them, look, I'm happy to consult with you guys, but I got to be building something on my own, something better. And I think it was interesting because this company had raised money. And they're having a barbecue, actually. It was in the summer. I'll never forget. My wife shows up and she's like, walk back to the car. And she's like, you have to leave.
could she sense?
All the red flags that apparently, huh?
Yeah, she's like, yeah, she knows. It was just one of those things where it felt like the just s- something fell off. Like it
Mm.
was, I think they were doing it more because this is, machine learning, and it was just a popular thing to be
Well, that was
building.
all the rage. Oh, 2016. Goodness. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
exactly right.
so
And they
much
brought
noise.
me in to build it, and I was like, uh, I mean, I've done companies like that before. Yeah, and I just felt so. I think for me, I just kind of knew like I wasn't going to do my best work here. And it wasn't like I was getting any younger, right? So for me, it was a
Mm.
question of, well, if you're not going to do your best work here, and you don't want to go find work at I've been courted by big tech companies to go to the Bay Area and go work there, but it's like I don't want to do that either. So I guess at some point, and maybe this answers your question, Gala, but it's like for me at least, I found, well, okay, I guess the best job is the one you're going to have to make for yourself.
Yep. Which is becoming more common for sure.
It is. And I think I'm going to go out and say this right now. I don't think that's for everybody. I think that entrepreneurship or going off on your own I don't think they haven't been conditioned for it. It's something you could probably
It's not
learn.
easy, right? It's not easy.
Do you know how hard it is to go and make your own dollar out there in the
No,
world? You know,
most people don't.
it's really difficult. Like, and you never forget that first dollar you earn on your own, but like that, then it becomes more habit. Like, I can't really see going back, and I mean, there's just a handful
Hmm.
of companies I consider working at, but then you reach a certain point, you become feral, and then you can't,
Yeah, yeah,
but because
that's true.
you could go to figuring out ways that you can make money on your own, but that I would say is scary for a lot of people. Like, if you think that, working a 9 to 5 is, has insecurity, the built-in insecurity of going on your own is like you're literally responsible for going out there and like figuring it out and how to make a living. It's like
Hmm.
I just dropped you off in the middle of a field with like a knife, and then I'm like, go
Figure it out.
go figure it out,
Survive.
you know. So
Yeah, for sure. On the topic of burnout, then, that can lead to that. Well, so those suffering burnout tend to be in a fog of war. They do tend to be in a foggy state. It's an emotional topic. They're frustrated. This may reflect back on their relationships at home and so on, which just feels the frustration. Given that distance is such a clarifier, Joe, if I can take you back to 2016 when you left that job, in hindsight, would you have handled anything differently?
maybe a couple things. I think I would have built my audience, or at least my network. I had a good network, so I can't really say that I did anything bad or wrong. I would say in the past times I've quit actually jobs earlier, and then I gave up because I got scared, right? I remember one time I had quit and was starting a business, and my kid was on the way, and I was like, I can't. That was a bit sketch. But I had to leave this job. It was very, very
Mm.
toxic. I worked with my best childhood friend, and that imploded very quickly. And so I was like, I can't, I can't be doing this. And so, but I think in that case, I didn't give myself enough room to really succeed, right? And so that's what more of what I look back is like, there are definitely times when you freak yourself out,
A bit
and
too
then
early, I mean.
yeah,
Like
you
maybe
just
if you'd kept
that's
at it.
that's what I mean. You're not ready some days, right? And you could, but sometimes you're just gonna have to overcome that hump and get and do it. I guess if that's what you want to do. Again, most people don't, and I don't think most people should. It's a lot of trauma. I mean, I look at people, for example, like one of my friends, she's been looking for work for ages right now, and like her husband just got laid off. And you want to talk about burnout, like and they got a kid, they want to do baby and stuff, and it's like, yeah, you want to talk about burnout, like she's burned out from being unemployed and looking for work and sending out, countless applications and hearing, just rejection after rejection. Like you want to talk about a soul sapping experience, like that's burnout too, in the other way, where, you have nobody to talk to and you're just lonely and rejected day after day, and like that sucks.
Yeah, Carly mentioned this in her beginning of her blog post, right, Carly, where you say burnout being the lack of progress. It's all this effort but no progress. And I think this is, well, it can be interpreted as an example of that sort of.
For sure. Yeah, I guess maybe it is dopamine, but it's also, I guess, survival that you're chasing when you're unemployed.
Hmm. Yep. There's a
It's
Maslow's
hard.
hierarchy of needs, right? And it begins with a job or some income and so on.
What are you guys' thoughts on? I mean, so it was like, you know, um, Zuckerberg talked about on the Joe Rogan podcast the other day about how Meta's not going to hire any engineers because AI can do all the work now. And what are your thoughts on what AI does to people at jobs, and
Mm.
how does it affect burnout?
I think people look at AI with some exceptional lens when really it is another technology history of technology is filled with technological boosts of productivity. That's all I see it as. It's just something that lets the individual do more. And sure, some jobs may be eliminated or even minimized rather than eliminated initially. But historically, we've always had new jobs being invented as well. The thing is, we don't know what those new jobs will be. That's the really hard part, right? Someone wrote online, I forget who, that when the car was invented, everyone could tell we could go from A to B faster, but no one predicted Walmart and all the jobs that spawned. And I think there's probably something here that AI will provide. I don't know. I think all the people sort of claiming that all jobs will be eliminated. You mentioned software engineering jobs or technical jobs. The people making the claims tend to not be technical people. They do tend to be VCs or, thinkfluencers or what have you. But by and large, you look at engineers, technical people, they're just doing more per unit time, like all just, historical technological improvements. I'm a bit sanguine about the whole thing. I think it's great. We can all do more. There's probably going to be more jobs, smaller teams, but more teams. And so rather than many people concentrated in one place, you'll probably have smaller groups spread across many places, all doing different things, which is great. Nothing pessimistic from me. Carly, what do you think?
I think I agree with how you're feeling about AI impacting roles like in the reality. I think that to me, him saying that, the intention was loud and clear. And again, to me, the way I'm reading it, and maybe it has something to do with my current headspace, but I
Mm,
think the intention was possibly to devalue. And
mm,
again, to make this point of you will eventually, if not already, need us more than we need you. And so stop complaining about RTO, stop complaining about
yeah.
treatment, stop complaining about anything because AI will just take your job and AI doesn't need an office. AI doesn't need a ping pong table. AI doesn't
Mm,
need mental health care. AI doesn't need all of the pesky things that make you human, that make you an annoyance to us as an employee. And I think you're
mm,
right, Joe. I think the social contract of what work used to be, where there was an implication that your employer was responsible for taking care of you and your family, ensuring that you had enough money to buy a house and buy food, and that happy employees reflected positively on the employer, right? That used to be some part of the social contract. And
mm,
now it's very clear that no number of people coming out and saying Meta is a horrible place to work will impact their ability to attract talent because people are desperate, and it won't impact their ability to make money because they're getting what they want in
mm, mm,
terms of everything that's happening. TikTok's getting banned. They're going to have a bigger piece of the pie, right? Like all of the things that they want have been happening, and they haven't had to treat anyone well to get there. So why would they start? That
hmm
stuff just costs money. Caring about you costs money, it costs time. AI doesn't need that. Because
There
they
is
say
a
shut up and act more like AI, or you'll find the harsh reality is that you will get replaced by AI.
what was I didn't actually see the interview. What was the quote, Joe, that there won't be any hiring of engineers due to AI or something
Yeah, I
along those
think
lines?
yeah, I think it was along the lines of like Meta isn't going to be doing any
Mm.
hiring of engineers because
There's
the AI can do
few
as good of a job.
engineers.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly they're not firing all their engineers. I mean, I'm sure we can all go to their websites and see posts looking to hire engineers. So, not to sound too Pollyannish, Carly, but one school of thought may say, well, they do need to make some people happy, otherwise people wouldn't work for them, right? They'd go work for their cutthroat competitors like the Googles and the Twitters and so on.
They're all
So there's
doing it.
some market force. Oh, I see. So if none of them, I see. Well, but
They
maybe
all
then
lower
someone,
their standards at exactly the same time. Where are you
yeah,
going to go?
yeah,
And then that happens with, if I can't say to you as a startup CEO, well, I have this offer from Google and they're offering me,
mm,
work from home perks and
yep, yep,
all this money for, whatever, paying into my gym membership.
mm,
They're offering me all these things. What can you do? Suddenly now I have no real leverage either. I'll come to you and be
mm,
like, please, can I work somewhere where you appreciate me?
yep, yep,
And
yep.
that's it. And I think that does leave. I think that it will be interesting. I think the same way that we don't understand the way AI is going to change jobs, we will also find that this almost overnight devaluing of employees by big tech is going
Mm,
to open some sort of void because it always does, wherein I think some people will probably do well. People keep talking about Costco. I've never heard anyone talk about Costco as much in my entire life as I have in the last week. And that's
why?
because Costco said, we're not getting rid of DEI initiatives. That's it.
Oh, I see.
They're like, we don't play this game. Our hot dogs are $1.50 and we give a fuck about our employees.
Mm,
And like that's literally the bare minimum. But by not joining the bandwagon, they've now positioned themselves as this bastion of employee happiness and
mm,
kind and caring compassion, which I don't know if they are or not. I think people have good things to say about the former CEO there and the legacy that he left.
Hmm.
But who would have ever thought, oh, yeah, Costco's the best place to work? It wasn't even on my radar
mm.
until recently. And now I'm thinking, I wonder if Costco's hiring.
That would be actually a good place.
Board
Well,
reader.
I go to Costco a lot. We actually have the world's largest Costco in Salt Lake City, believe it or not. It's right down the street from me. It's awesome. Go there all the time. Uh, and I look at the dates, the hire dates of people on their name tags, and there's people that have been there since 2002. It's a great place to work, I think, by any account. Great benefits, great culture. I mean, I've never heard a bad word about it. Watch like Sam's Club, they do it. Mark Zuckerberg said like there's not enough masculine companies out there or something. Which like watch like Sam's Club or Walmart says that like we need to be more masculine.
Mm.
Not like Costco. So
Costco's for sissies.
bunch of
Come to
wimps.
Sam's
Yeah.
Club, buy guns, man stuff.
Is it possible, Carl, you used the phrase of, what was the phrase you used? Overcorrection. Is it possible that, well, we were on one extreme and now we're in another, and somewhere there's to use a trite expression, a happy medium?
Maybe. I
It's so
guess,
hard to tell, right?
right?
Predicting the future.
If we, it's so crazy because it's almost like we're labeling mistakes now as overcorrections, right? So like the
Mhm.
mistakes of COVID was like an
Mm,
overhiring, overcorrection
yeah.
to what was happening. And now we'll look at this in 10 years maybe and say this was an overcorrection to the DEI era, where that was
Mm,
an overcorrection to rampant discrimination. Like at every point, I'm even guilty of this and saying it's an overcorrection now. It seems like there's no one at the wheel pulling us towards any semblance of like,
bipolar existence from one extreme to the
yeah,
other.
have we ever found some sort of happy medium? Like
Mm.
the 80s were coke fueled crazy greed parties.
Oh, we're
Like,
we're going back to that.
Well, so
yeah, right? And so we're just shifting back and forth in time. Like history's just repeating itself and not in a way where you'll ever find, I think we talk about this era where employers cared about employees and there was a social contract, right? But there was
mm,
also a horrible side to that. Women couldn't work or get loans or credit cards in their own names. And so
mm,
their husbands had to have this
mm,
contract with
mm.
their employers such that they could support a
Yeah.
family because women were infantilized and not allowed to do anything. And so we can't go back to that,
Mm,
obviously. And
Well,
so where are we?
well, in the world before that too was we had children working in factories, and there's a
Yeah,
whole book, The Jungle by Upton Sinclair about meat
meat
factories and
packing.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
just horrible,
mm.
horrible conditions, right? Yeah, I guess but we'll deregulate everything
It's
pretty
hard.
soon. We'll be back.
yeah.
My
We have
kids will
like
be
a
employed.
zero tolerance policy for children's fingers in our packed meat, and we're gonna go back to like plus or minus a couple fingers.
Yeah,
You know?
it's like Costco hot dogs. Just a couple of
Yeah.
them. It's fine.
It's
Still
a
a buck
risk of
50.
the job. What are you going to be, 5 years old, not working in a meat packing factory? Like,
Yeah, it's not acceptable. But that's, I mean,
On
it is interesting. I mean, it is. I think you do point out something interesting, Carly, about the pendulum, and it's just crazy how quickly it came back since the election. Everyone's all of a sudden like, oh yeah, no, we're all about everything that we said we weren't about just a second ago.
yeah, we lied before, but we're telling the truth now.
Yeah.
All
Do you
right.
feel for the listeners who are going, well, I am burnt out, I identify with these feelings, any advice for them?
Don't doom scroll TikTok. It's not going to help.
Well, you
Yeah,
can't after
that's a
January
big one.
19th anyway.
Oh, that's true. So
Yeah.
get used to not doing it now.
Well, they're getting rid of it, right? So I think I don't, at least in the U.S.
This keeps coming up. We still don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless they find a
I
buyer
hate to
for
be
it.
overly prescriptive with this stuff as well because I feel like, when I posted my article, a lot of well meaning people came to me and were like, you practice more gratitude. And I think there's something to that, right?
For
But
sure.
I
I'm from
also,
the third world, and so I look at America and go, what does anyone have anything to complain about? Everyone's, it's a first world country, everyone's rich and relatively, right?
right.
To the third
Yeah.
world and so on. But I realize, as again, that's a bit of a superficial attitude, right? People care about their own lives and
Yeah.
their own families. Everyone does.
I think I also talked earlier this year about toxic positivity and toxic
Mm,
optimism. I think that, one thing that we are probably guilty of is seeing workers or unemployed workers, seeing them being burned out and then being like, you got this. You just have to think more positively. You just have to be better and believe in yourself harder. You just have to be more optimistic that there's hope for the future. And, you wouldn't go to someone who's drowning and say, like,
Mm,
but if you think positive, it'll get better. Like,
mm,
what is there to be grateful for when you're in the middle of a crisis? And I think that we shift blame from society, from the machinations of capitalism, from what Joe calls late stage capitalism, right? We shift the blame to the people experiencing the harms of those systems. And we say, well, if you were just happier about it, or you just found things to be grateful for, like the fact that, you haven't drowned yet, you might be treading water and you're tired, but be
mm,
grateful that the water's not 10 degrees colder. Like that kind of thinking, I think, is kind of blame shifty.
mm.
And I don't know, maybe that sounds way too pessimistic, but I think by telling people it's okay to just feel over it, right? In this new political climate, my favorite phrase to tell everyone is I refuse to be educated because I do. I don't care anymore. I'm not going to listen to whatever anyone wants to say about anything. They're like, use the
Mm.
Oxford comma. No, I'm not going to do it. I don't care. Like the social contract has fallen apart.
Is there anything,
Participate.
any steps people can take? So suppose they are actually employed, the paychecks are coming in, but they've got this feeling of burnout that we covered. Are there any steps people can take within their jobs? Which may mean ejecting those jobs. I don't know, as a potential avenue, but any thoughts on potential solutions?
one piece of advice I give people is, it's better to do this with others, meaning,
Mm,
build your network and build your audience if you're on social media. Carly's done a hell of a job at doing that, for example. But it's about having the support network of people who could both be friends and help you in situations, either the coworkers who can help you through whatever you're going through, but I think more importantly, finding people outside of your work, because if there is something that happens like a redundancy, you're all in the same boat all of a sudden, and you could be the most popular person within your little group of people at your workplace, but suddenly all of you are on the street. Nobody else really knows about you all except each other, right? And I think that's one of the biggest things I see is you think there's safety in numbers in your workplace, but then you come to realize if you haven't been working on your network outside
Hmm.
of your office or your workplace, maybe now is a good time to start. There's lots of meetups you can go
mm,
to if you're in tech. The social media, I would say get known on that if that's what you want to do, but I'm increasingly beginning to think that that's not optional. Pardon me, I
that's
think
not what?
it's not optional. I don't know anymore. I wrote about this recently. I think obscurity is just the biggest enemy of people, and I think it at least gives you some comfort in knowing that if something does happen, there's people that got your back, or at least you do have a network that can help you out. That's the first step, but also like saving money and just setting up a cushion where if things do
That's a big
happen,
one. It's so underappreciated, this one.
it's huge, right? But I just think things like this, like making sure you have your foundation covered, gives you a lot of mental relief because then you aren't stressing like shit. If I'm on the street, like I'm gonna be, I don't know what I'm gonna do for money, right? I got mortgage, I got this, that, the other thing.
Mm.
So it's also a lifestyle. Like maybe if you think something's gonna happen, like start paring down your lifestyle because like do you need all the shit that you buy anyway? Like, I don't know. As I look at all the shit that I buy, but those are some of the things I would say. Just get your bases covered. I think it gives you a lot of mental bandwidth where if you're burned out, at least like if something happens, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Because the biggest source of insecurity I see is people who don't have that mental bandwidth and they're like one, you know, paycheck away from pretty bad situation. Like I know some people I know who were, one's a C-level at a very big tech company, and I think this person mentioned the word foreclosure. If things continue the way they are, this person's been out of work for a bit, and that's reality. So you're high on the hog one day, something happens, and it just spirals.
Mm. Do
That
you think there's an
happens.
elephant in the room that you did touch upon this, I think. Do you think there's an elephant in the room people rarely talk about, which is making sure to invest in your personal life whether, some people are lucky enough to indeed have a spouse and kids, but others maybe can invest in their friends, and so on. I think a lot of the chatter tends to be centered on the work. What can you do at work? But there's probably stuff you can do outside, right? Which is the stuff you alluded to, Joe. These are things that absorb shocks in your life.
Well, I mean, Warren Buffett said the best investment you can make is in yourself. I believe that. What were you saying, Carly?
No, I was going to say, I think that's a good point. I remember seeing a quote recently about, asking why people get married. And one of the best answers I heard was that people want someone to bear witness to their life, to all the mundane pieces of your life, not even the big parts, the small parts. And I don't think you have to be married to find those people to bear witness to your experience. But if you try to go at it alone, it's going to be much harder. And so, one thing that actually ended up helping me, right? We're having this conversation now is I sat down and put pen to paper talking about my burnout. And I'd been
Mm.
feeling this way for some time, but I'd never really vocalized it and I had never put it out into the world. And then so many people came to me and said, I feel the same way. Like Joe said, people who are in high level positions, people who are unemployed, people
It's
who are
amazing.
in,
Do you have people just messaging you
oh yeah, tons of
and
people,
emailing messaging and so on?
so many people from all
I'm a
over.
guy, I share nothing, right? To me, this is the opposite of so I'm so curious as to what happens when you do this sort of thing.
Yeah. It was an outpouring of support and then other people going through the same thing who were like, same. I
People just
felt
felt
the same
safe to
effects.
start sharing
Yeah.
things with you and
Yes.
let you know that you're not alone.
Uh-huh. And I think it's interesting to, in some way, maybe they felt like they wanted to tell me that they wanted me to bear witness to how they were feeling and to their pain. But I also write knowing that my boss and my boss's boss and my boss's boss's boss follow me on LinkedIn. And that was something that I had to contend with. Like, do I want to actually put this out there knowing that the people for whom I work will also see how I'm feeling? And ultimately, I decided that yes, because I think it's good for everyone to bear witness to what happens when you push people and you push them on the treadmill and you give them, the carrot. The carrot keeps getting smaller. The carrot used to be a donut, something that looked nice, and then it becomes an actual carrot, and then it becomes maybe a twig with a berry on it, and before long there's nothing worth running for, right? Like, what's the reward?
Hmm.
And so I don't know, I think that probably discussing it with other people and not internalizing it is the
Mm.
best thing people can do. Especially men in tech, I think, struggle often in silence. I think people talk about,
Classic stereotype, right?
right? There's like a loneliness epidemic among men because they don't know how to share how they're feeling about things. And I wonder how much of the burnout that we're seeing being discussed is people who feel emotionally secure enough to do so versus
Mm.
the people who suffer in silence. I don't
Did you
know.
get a good dose of men writing into you
I did.
saying, "Oh, that's
I did.
most
The
interesting"?
people who were probably like empathetic, motherly, offering advice, coming in caringly were like the women. The people who were more like, I feel the same way, fuck this, I don't know what to do. Thank you for writing this, were more of the men.
So interesting.
Yeah. And I wonder how people internalize that and then in turn talk about it, because like if you're the breadwinner for your family, which a lot of men are, what do you do with that? You come home to your partner who relies on you and say, like, I hate my fucking job, I'm going to quit it. And they're like, okay, how are we going to buy baby formula? That's a lot of pressure to put on a person. And it's hard to talk about because where do you go from there?
Mm. Joe, do you concur having a family with these sentiments?
Oh yeah, yeah, I do. But I think I don't know. After a bit, I think if you're open with the other person, they get used to
Yep.
your
But it does underline what Carly said, right? Which is simply expressing things and not
yeah.
bottling them
It
up.
does help though, because
It creates a dynamic.
otherwise people are wondering like what's going on, and like why are you so grumpy all the time? Then you drive your cyber truck over to Trump's hotel and blow it up just because you're so
Yeah.
unhinged, that. So I don't know. Don't do that.
It's
Cybertruck's
very possible then, on that note, and I realize it is a morbid note, but I'll take it somewhere less morbid. It is, I suppose, possible that people can feel burnout when they're not listened to as well, right? It maybe they recognize
all the
everything.
time, man, all the time.
I'm not appreciated, right? The stuff I do doesn't matter, and so on and so forth. And they've taken the steps to express it. And what comes back is more nothing.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't sound good, does it?
Yeah, but there's a huge loneliness epidemic in the country too. I mean, it was Derek Thompson from The Atlantic had a really good podcast, an article about just this is like the most lonely time that people are experiencing right now across the board, at least in America. Like we're withdrawn, like we don't have
Was
social
this
circles anymore.
no one wants to make friends anymore, or what exactly?
We do it all on podcasts, actually. This is how we make friends. Yeah, you guys are friends, and you'll do a podcast next time you talk to each other, and um, no, but that's, I mean, it's, you live vicariously through
Mm,
social media, right? And then it's like, if I don't have, X number of social followers, I'm human garbage. Like everyone wants to be an influencer right now. My kids, it's like that's what they look at. That's like, well, I could be popular on YouTube.
of
That's really
course,
how I get
yeah.
my validation and so forth. I mean, Carly and I are, I guess, called quote influencers, but we're not like Mr. Beast.
Mm-mm.
Speak for yourself.
Oh, true, true. But yeah, but I think there's this, I don't know, it's a sense that what you see online is sort of, I guess we've always had this with TV, but a lot of this is aspirational stuff, and I want a life like that,
Maybe the support structures, right, were stronger in the past. And so, yes, fine, you had TV, but then you did have stronger support structures,
Well, I
real
remember
life,
when I
so
was a
to
kid,
speak.
we'd go to church,
Yep.
Catholic and whatnot, and you go play with your friends. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, I'm Gen X. I mean, my childhood was literally like Stranger Things.
You were allowed outside.
Strangely enough, yes. I mean,
Yeah,
we
kids aren't allowed outside nowadays.
I know my kids go out, but Utah got rid of the. I think, yeah, going to Utah, they got tired of parents calling up another parents calling the cops saying, "Oh, the kids are outside," and they're just like, if the kids are fed and they're not in harm, let them do their thing. Like, just leave them alone. And so I'm like, just go roam the streets. I don't care. Just don't get hit.
Go get your street smarts literally on the streets.
It's how that works, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful on things, but I think it feels like definitely the beginning of this year was eye-opening. You could kind of sort of
Mm.
see twinges of this throughout the holidays and whatnot, but it seems like when people went back to work, they're just like, "What the fuck?"
We were like, wait, it's been 3 weeks and nothing changed fundamentally? Like, what? This isn't fair.
It's not. Well, thanks everybody. I Yeah, just figured we'd chat about burnout. Like you said, it's been the topic du jour. Carly, you did a
It's
wonderful job
worth
with the article.
recognizing for sure.
Yeah.
It's worth recognizing. Certainly, I don't know, can we just wrap things up on an optimistic note for people? Well,
Do
talk
your
about it,
best.
certainly. But I think don't be afraid to talk about it. I think you could look at that as optimistic advice, Carly, as you taking your advice really and echoing it feels like an optimistic move.
I think so.
Understand you're not so unique after all, which I realize sounds bad, but I think it is good to just recognize that you're not so special because it does mean there's other people with you in the same boat.
Yeah, and I would encourage people just probably be more open about it, and you'll meet other people who are going through the same situation. I think that's
Hmm.
almost always how you're going to at least find a solution out of your like the people who hit up Carly, right? And you mentioned your boss is Carly. It's interesting because I'm like I almost guarantee you they're going through something similar. It's not like they're just sitting. It's not like they're just sitting in the jacuzzi, like, yeah, I'm glad we burned her to a crisp. That's awesome.
Drinking
Good job,
champagne,
guys.
being
Fist
like,
bump. Yeah, I mean, they're
what?
all. No, I mean, it's up and down the hierarchy, right? This is pervasive. I don't care who you are, what company you're at right now. It's just this a sense of like, what am I doing? And then it's and some of these organizations are so big, it's like they just sort of take on a life of their own, and like I don't know if
Mm.
anyone's actually in charge of the company or if it's just the inertia of it itself that sort of just moves it, you know?
Mm.
It's almost just this invisible force where I don't know that any one person actually has any ultimate control over
Mm.
things. You might be CEO and have some control over the strategy and direction, but I mean, there's just so much that happens in the nooks and crannies of these companies. It's crazy. Cool. Well, anyway, have a nice day.
Thanks for hosting us, Joe.
Of
This
course.
was uplifting and made me really, really excited.
I'll Venmo
Tomorrow's
you some cash
Monday
for
too,
some.
so this is the way we exercise our Sunday scaries.
Oh boy, yeah. They don't have a delivery for alcohol on Sundays in Denver, do they? I'll Venmo you some 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 drinks. All right, see y'all.
Okay. Thanks,
Bye.
guys.